The stone has been there for 4 days. You can smell it from the road. Everyone can. That is why Martha says what she says when Jesus finally arrives. Lord, by this time there is a stench. She is not being dramatic. She is telling him the truth. Her brother is gone. Not just gone. Gone in the way that means no coming back, no last conversation, no chance to say the thing you always meant to say. Gone in the way that makes the air around a tomb feel different from any other air you have ever breathed. Jesus is standing outside that tomb. He has the power to open it. He has already told Martha, moments ago on the road, with dust still on his sandals, I am the resurrection and the life. He said those words. He meant them. And he is about to prove them in a way that will leave the crowd speechless, and the religious leaders murderous, and the disciples struggling to understand what they just witnessed. He knows the ending. He knows Lazarus is about to walk out of that tomb alive. He knows the weeping is almost over. He knows that in approximately 3 minutes, the worst day of Mary and Martha's lives will become the most extraordinary day they have ever seen, and still, he weeps. That is where we begin, not with the miracle, with the tears that came before it, because somewhere between the tomb and the resurrection, in a moment that lasts only 2 words in the original Greek, the Son of God does something that has haunted theologians and broken open grieving hearts for 2,000 years. He stops, he looks at the people he loves, and he cries with them. There is one more moment we will come to before this video is finished. Not at a tomb, not in a garden, but in the middle of a cheering crowd on the most celebrated day of his public life, where Jesus breaks down in a way that nobody around him even notices. We will get to that moment. But first, we need to understand what is happening here, outside this tomb, on this dusty road in Bethany. Because this moment is not just history. It is a message aimed directly at you. His name was Lazarus, and Jesus loved him. This is not a theological statement. That is a relational one. The Gospel of John uses a specific Greek word for the love between Jesus and this family. Phileo, the love of deep friendship, of chosen companionship, of the kind of bond that means you show up at someone's home not because you have to, but because being with them is where you want to be. Mary and Martha sent a message when Lazarus fell sick. Not a prayer request, a message. Lord, the one you love is sick. They didn't beg, they didn't ask. They simply reminded him of the relationship, as if to say, you know this man. You know this house. You have eaten at this table. Please come. He did not come. Not immediately. Not for 2 days. He stayed where he was, across the Jordan, and when his disciples raised their eyebrows, he said something extraordinary. This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory so that God's Son may be glorified through it. He had a plan. He always had a plan. But here is what most people miss. Having a plan does not mean you are immune to the weight of what the plan costs. Knowing the ending does not make the middle painful. Jesus delayed his arrival, not because he did not care, but because he was working in a timeline his friends could not yet see. And when he finally arrives, when he crests the hill and sees Mary falling at his feet weeping, and the crowd that came with her also weeping, something happens in him that no amount of theological explanation fully captures. He is deeply moved. The Greek word John uses here is enebrymasato, a word that carries the sense of a groan that comes from somewhere below speech. Not a polite sign, not a pastoral nod, a sound that rises from the gut, from the place where love and grievance and fury at death itself all collide at once. And then he asks a question he already knows the answer to. Where have you laid him? They say, Lord, come and see. And then, the shortest verse in the English Bible. 2 words. Words that seminary students memorize, and children recite in Sunday school competitions, and preachers quote from pulpits around the world. Jesus wept. The Greek is edakrusen, and it is a specific kind of crying. Not the loud, heaving sobs that Mary and the crowd are pouring out, silent tears. The kind that comes when you are trying to hold yourself together and cannot. The kind that streaks down the face without permission. The kind you cry when you are standing in a place where someone you loved used to be and now is not. He is not crying because he has lost hope. He is crying because the people he loves are in pain, and he loves them enough to feel it with them rather than stand above it. This is the first thing you need to understand about the God of the Bible. He does not manage your grievance from a comfortable distance. He does not send a representative. He does not offer a theological explanation as a substitute for his presence. He walks to the place where the worst thing happened, and he stands there with you. If you are weeping, he cries, not because he has forgotten his power, not because he has lost control of the situation, because love does not skip the hard part. Now we move forward in time. About 6 weeks. The scene could not be more different. It is Palm Sunday, the day the Christian calendar calls the triumphal entry. Jesus is riding a donkey down from the Mount of Olives toward the city of Jerusalem, and the road is lined with people who have been waiting for this moment their entire lives. They are throwing their cloaks on the ground in front of him. They are cutting palm branches and waving them in the air. They are shouting, not whispering, not murmuring, shouting at the top of their lungs. Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. This is the moment the prophets wrote about. The moment Zechariah described 500 years earlier. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey. The crowd knows their scripture. They know what this entrance means, and they are electrified. Children are running alongside the road. Pharisees are standing at the edge of the crowd, furious, telling Jesus to silence his disciples. The noise is so great that Luke records the Pharisees saying the whole world has gone after him. This is a parade, a coronation, the happiest public moment of Jesus' entire ministry, and Jesus crests the hill. He sees Jerusalem spread out before him. The white limestone walls, cool, catching the morning sun, the Temple Mount gleaming. The city that has stood for 1,000 years, the city of David, the city of God, the city that every Jewish child has sung about since before they could walk. The city that 3 times a year fills with pilgrims from across the known world, all of them coming home, all of them chanting the same psalms their grandparents sang. He sees it, and he breaks. But it gets stranger. Because Luke tells us something that Matthew and Mark do not record. In the middle of this parade, with the crowd cheering around him, with palm branches in the air, with the hosannas echoing off the valley walls, Jesus stops, and he weeps over the city. The Greek word Luke uses here is eklausen, and it is not the same word John used at the tomb of Lazarus. Edakrusen, silent tears streaming down the face. That was Bethany. Eklausen, this is something else entirely. This is the Greek word for loud, heaving, uncontrollable sobbing. It is the same word Luke uses for the women weeping on the road to Golgotha. It is the same word used for Peter after he denies Jesus 3 times and goes outside and cries bitterly. It is the sound of grievance makes when it has nowhere left to go. The crowd is shouting Hosanna. Jesus is sobbing, and nobody around him understands why. He speaks through his tears. Luke records the words, and they are some of the most haunting words in all 4 Gospels. If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you, and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you. He is not speaking in metaphor. He is not exaggerating for effect. He is describing, with forensic precision, what is going to happen to this city in approximately 40 years. And here is where we need to step outside the Bible for a moment. Because one of the most remarkable things about this passage is what happened when a Roman Jewish historian named Josephus sat down, roughly 40 years after Jesus spoke these words, and wrote his account of the destruction of Jerusalem. Josephus was there. He was a Jewish general who surrendered to the Romans and survived to document what he saw. And his account in the Jewish war is devastating. The Roman general Titus surrounded the city exactly as Jesus described, built siege walls, cut off escape, hemmed the population in on every side. By the time it was over, Josephus records that more than 1 million people had died inside Jerusalem's walls. The temple, the gleaming structure Jesus is looking at right now from the crest of this hill, was burned to the ground. The stones were pulled apart to recover the gold that had melted into the cracks. Not one stone was left on another, exactly as Jesus said. He is weeping because he can see it. The whole terrible sequence of it, the siege, the famine inside the walls, the children, the fire, the silence where the temple music used to be. He sees every detail of a catastrophe that is 40 years away, and the crowd around him sees nothing but palm branches and a parade. Pay attention to this, because this is the loneliest kind of grievance there is. The grievance of seeing what is coming and being unable to make the people you love see it too. You have felt something like this, maybe not on this scale, but you have stood at the edge of a decision someone you loved was making, and you could see where it was going, and they could not or would not, and there was nothing you could do but watch. You have grieved the future of someone who was still celebrating their present. You have carried a sorrow that had no name yet, because the thing you were grieving had not happened yet. Jesus wept for Jerusalem not because he had given up on her. Eusebius, the 4th century church historian, wrote that the early Christians understood this passage as one of the most profound expressions of divine love in all of Scripture. Not judgment, not condemnation, but a God who grieves the distance between what his people are and what they could be. He cries for the city. He cries for the people. He cries for every generation that will walk through those gates and never know that on this particular morning, on this particular hillside, God himself sat on a donkey and cried over them. And here is the question that this scene puts directly to you. What does God see in your life right now that you cannot see yet? What is he grieving that you are still celebrating? What distance exists between where you are standing and where this road is actually taking you? And is there still time to turn? Because the tears of Jesus over Jerusalem were not the tears of a judge pronouncing a sentence. They were the tears of a father watching a child walk towards something he cannot stop and cannot bear to watch, and loves too much to look away from. He didn't cry because he stopped caring. He wept because he never did. Now we come to the third scene, and this one is different. At the tomb of Lazarus, he wept with the people he loved. On the hill above Jerusalem, he wept for a city that could not see what was coming. In this scene, he cries alone, or almost alone. It's Thursday night. The Last Supper is finished. The bread has been broken, the cup has been passed, and Judas has already slipped out into the dark. Jesus leads the remaining 11 through the narrow streets of Jerusalem, out through the eastern gate across the Kidron Valley, and up into an olive grove on the lower slope of the Mount of Olives. The place is called Gethsemane. The word means oil press. He takes Peter, James, and John, the 3 who were with him on the Mount of Transfiguration, the 3 who saw his face shine like the sun, and he leads them a little further in. And then he says something that stops you cold when you read it slowly. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow at the point of death, not troubled, not heavy, overwhelmed to the point of death. The Greek word is paralipos, a sorrow that has wrapped itself around you on every side, that has closed off every exit, that presses in from all directions simultaneously. This is not a man who is sad. This is a man who is carrying something so heavy that the carrying itself feels fatal. He asks them to stay awake with him. Stay with me. 3 words. The most human request in the entire gospel. Not a theological statement, not a command. A request from a man who does not want to be alone in the worst night of his life. The same Jesus who calmed the storm and raised the dead and walked on water is asking 3 fishermen, please, just stay awake with me tonight. He goes a little further, falls on his face, and begins to pray. This is where the letter to the Hebrews reaches back into this garden and gives us the single most arresting description of what happened next. Chapter 5, verse 7. Read it slowly. During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. Fervent cries. The Greek word is kraugazo. This is not a quiet word. Kraugazo is the sound a soldier makes in battle when the line breaks. It is the sound a man makes when he has been wounded, and the wound will not stop. It is a cry that comes from the body before it reaches the mind, raw, unfiltered. The kind of sound that makes people in the next room go still. The Son of God in the Garden of Gethsemane cried out with the sound of a man in agony. And Luke adds a medical detail that most people read past without stopping. Luke was a physician. He noticed things other gospel writers did not. And what he records about this night is this. Jesus' sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. This is not poetry. This is a medical condition called hematidrosis. It occurs under conditions of extreme psychological stress. When the body's anguish becomes so acute that the capillaries surrounding the sweat glands rupture and bleed into them. The result is a sweat tinged with blood, appearing on the skin in dark droplets. It has been documented in soldiers before battle, in prisoners before execution, in people facing something so terrible that the body itself begins to break under the weight of anticipating it. Jesus sweats blood in that garden, and Peter, James, and John, the three he asked to stay awake, were asleep. Here is the part nobody tells you. The disciples, who slept that night, have been quietly criticized by 2,000 years of Sunday school teachers. We read their failure with a kind of gentle condescension. They could not even stay awake for 1 hour. But Luke adds one detail that the other gospel writers do not include. He says they were sleeping exhausted from sorrow. They were not lazy. They were grieved broken. They had just sat through the most devastating meal of their lives. Their teacher telling them he was leaving, that one of them would betray him, that Peter would deny him before morning. They had absorbed more sorrow in 3 hours than most people absorbed in a year. And the body, overwhelmed, shut down. Jesus came back 3 times and found them sleeping 3 times. And each time he returned to the garden alone, and prayed again, and sweat blood again, and cried out again with the sound that kraugazo names, the cry that tears the throat, the prayer that costs everything just to speak. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. Not my will, but yours. 5 words that carry the full weight of what obedience costs when obedience leads somewhere you would not choose. 5 words spoken by a man whose face was wet with tears and blood, whose closest friends were unconscious behind him, whose betrayer was already on the road with soldiers and torches and a plan. 5 words that have held up every person who ever had to surrender something they desperately wanted to keep. Now, watch what happens next. X. Go back to the hillside above Jerusalem. Go back to Palm Sunday. Go back to the crowd cheering and the cloaks on the road and the hosannas echoing through the valley. Go back to the moment Jesus crests the hill and sees the city. He is weeping, loud, heaving, eklausen weeping. And now you understand something you could not understand before. He is not just weeping over what will happen to Jerusalem in 40 years. He is weeping over everything the cross is going to cost. He is weeping over the distance between what this city is celebrating and what he is walking toward. The crowd sees a king arriving in triumph. He sees a garden 3 nights away, and a cross the morning after, and the full weight of what it means to carry the sin of every person who has ever lived, including every person in this cheering crowd, all the way to its end. He is weeping in public, surrounded by celebration, because he is the only one who knows what this week is actually going to cost. That is the loneliest weeping in Scripture. And Eusebius was right. The early church did not read this passage as condemnation. They read it as the most complete picture of divine love available to human understanding. A God who sees everything: the betrayal, the garden, the cross, the silence of Holy Saturday. and still rides toward it, still weeping over the city, still loves the people who will shout Hosanna on Sunday and crucify him on Friday. He cries through the cost of loving us all the way to the end. And if you have ever carried something so heavy that it felt like it was going to kill you, if you have ever prayed a prayer that tore your throat, if you have ever fallen on your face in a dark place and asked God to let this cup pass, then you are not praying to a God who is unfamiliar with that posture. You are praying to the one who invented it. Before we get to the 3 things I want to leave you with, I want to ask you something, not a theological question, a personal one. When was the last time you brought your tears to God? Not your composed prayers, not your Sunday morning vocabulary, not the version of yourself that has it mostly together and just needs a little guidance. When did you last come to him the way Mary came? Falling at his feet, not explaining, not asking, just weeping. When did you last pray the way Jesus prayed in Gethsemane? Kraugazo, the cry that tears the throat, the prayer you did not have words for. Because somewhere between the tomb of Lazarus and the Garden of Gethsemane, a picture emerges that is radically different from the God many of us were handed growing up. This is not a God who requires you to compose yourself before you approach him. This is not a God who rewards the people who suffer quietly and keeps his distance from the ones who fall apart. This is a God who walked to the worst-smelling place in Bethany and stood in the grievance with the people he loved. A God who sat on a hillside above a celebrating city and sobbed over what he could see coming. A God who sweat blood in an olive grove and cried out with sounds that had no words. This is a God who knows what your tears feel like from the inside. If this is landing somewhere real for you, if you are watching this in a season where the weight is almost more than you can carry, I want you to do one thing before you move on. Not subscribe, not share, just stop and tell him, whatever it is, the thing you have been holding together in public and falling apart over in private, the grievance that has no name yet, the prayer you have been too afraid to pray because you were not sure he could handle it. He can handle it. He invented the prayer that tears the throat. He knows the posture of falling on your face. He has been to the place where the cost of love feels fatal, and he stayed aid anyway. If this video has been meaningful to you, the best thing you can do is share it with one person who needs it, not for the algorithm. Because somewhere in your life, there is a person sitting outside a tomb right now, and they need to know that the God who stood there with Mary is standing there with them too. Now, 3 things I want you to carry out of this video. The first thing, Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus, even though he knew the resurrection was 3 minutes away. Sit with that for a moment. He was not weeping because he had lost hope. He was not weeping because the situation was beyond repair. He was weeping because the people he loved were in pain. And love, real love, does not stand at a clinical distance from pain and explain it. Love enters the room. Love sits on the floor. Love lets the weight of someone else's grievance become its own weight, even temporarily, even when it knows the ending. This means something specific for you. When you are in the middle of the worst chapter of your life, when the stone feels permanent, and the smell of death is real and you cannot imagine a morning that looks different from this one. God is not in heaven checking his timeline and waiting for the right moment to act while remaining unmoved by your suffering. He is standing outside your tomb. He is deeply moved. He is, in ways that exceed our ability to fully comprehend, weeping with you. Not because he has forgotten his power, not because he has lost the plot. Because he loves you enough to feel what you feel before he fixes what is broken. He enters the grievance. Every time, without exception. The second thing. Jesus wept over Jerusalem from a hillside while the crowd around him celebrated. He was grieving a future they could not see. He was carrying a sorrow that had no present tense explanation. He was the only person on that road who understood what this week was going to cost. And he rode toward it anyway, weeping, loving, refusing to stop. There is a kind of pain that is very hard to explain to other people. The pain of seeing clearly. The pain of knowing something is coming and being unable to stop it. The pain of watching someone you love makes a choice that you know will cost them everything, and having no power to intervene. The pain of grieving a future that has not happened yet, alone, while the people around you are fine. If you have carried that kind of sorrow, the lonely, forward-facing grievance that has no good words, then you need to know this. You are not strange for feeling it. You are not weak for being undone by something that has not happened yet. You are not broken because your pain has no present tense explanation that other people can verify. You are in the company of Jesus on a hillside. He sees more than you do, and he is not unmoved by what he sees. The God who wept over Jerusalem is weeping over every consequence of every broken thing in this world that you and I cannot yet see. And he is still riding toward it, still working, still refusing to abandon the city he loves. Your pain is not invisible to him. Your future is not unknown to him. And the distance between where you are standing and where he is taking you, he has already wept over every mile of it. The third thing, and this is the one I want you to carry longest. In the Garden of Gethsemane, on the worst night of his life, the Son of God fell on his face and cried out with a sound the Greek language calls kraugazo. The cry that comes before words, the prayer that tears the throat, the sound a person makes when they are carrying something that feels too heavy to survive. And the Father heard him. Hebrews chapter 5 verse 7 does not just say, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears. It says he was heard. He was heard because of his reverent submission. The cry went up, and it was received, which means this: the most anguished prayer ever prayed. The prayer soaked in blood and sweat and the full terror of what was coming. Was not too broken to be heard. Was not too raw to reach heaven. Was not too desperate to be answered. If the kraugazo of Gethsemane reached the Father, your prayer reaches him too. Not your composed prayer. Not your theologically precise prayer. Not the prayer you rehearsed before you said it. The one you cried in your car. The one you prayed on the bathroom floor. The one that came out as nothing but a sound because you did not have words left. The one you were almost ashamed of because it felt too desperate, too unpolished, too honest for a God this holy. That prayer, that one, it reaches him. Because the God you are praying to is not a God who sits in perfect stillness waiting for dignified petitions. He is a God who fell on his face in an olive grove and prayed the same prayer 3 times in sweat blood between each one. He is a God who knows what it costs to pray when praying feels like it might break you. He is a God who was hurt in his own anguish, and who hears you in yours. 2,000 years ago, outside a tomb in Bethany, on a hillside above Jerusalem, and in a garden on a Thursday night, God showed us something that no systematic theology could have invented, and no human religion would have thought to include. He showed us that he cries, not as a weakness, not as a failure of divine composition, as the fullest possible expression of what it means to love something the way God loves the world, completely, at great cost, all the way to the end, without looking away. The shortest verse in the Bible is 2 words, Jesus wept. But it is not a small verse. It is the size of everything. It is the answer to every prayer you have ever prayed in the dark. The ones that asked, does he know? Does he see? Does he care? Is he even there? He is there. He was always there. And if you have ever stood outside a tomb and wondered whether God was moved by what moved you, now you know. He wept first. Which of these 3 scenes hit you the hardest? The tomb, the hillside, or the garden? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with this. There are 2 more videos on this channel that belong alongside this one. The first looks at every time God said, I have heard your cry in Scripture. From Hagar in the wilderness to the Israelites in Egypt to Hannah in the temple. The second looks at every time Jesus said, do not be afraid. And why those 4 words mean something completely different once you understand who is he saying them and what it costs him to say them. Both are linked at the end of this video. If this one was useful, subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. And if you know someone sitting outside a tomb right now, someone in a season where the stone feels permanent, send this to them. Not with a long explanation. Just send it. Sometimes the most important thing one person can do for another is say, "Here, I found something. I thought of you." God heard the cry in the garden. He hears yours too. We will see you in the next one.